privacy. So
Okay. Okay, thanks.
okay, good. We're live.
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good. No, I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. Thank you. It's okay. I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm good. No, I'm good. Thanks.
Just keep
Yeah,
it
no,
just in case.
no, I appreciate it.
Before we go back.
It's good. Thank you. Oh, thanks. Okay, no, I'm good. Thank you. No, I'm good. Is it like a new setup though?
I lost my cell phone, so I don't know how to do my life. I spent all morning looking for it. I know I had it last night before I went to the play. And it's black, of course, and so is my car. But do you have one of those phones that the car that one of the phone comes through and you don't have to hold the phone?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so here's my logic. When I don't have my phone on me, I can't call out, right?
Well, yes.
Okay, so I can call out and I can get calls. So that means it's gotta be in the car, right? My cell phone has to be on and in the car to do that, right?
Okay, so if it is in the car, but it is on quiet because I can, if you give me a number, I can.
We've tried that and I know it's on quiet. But
I see.
it should still go zzz.
Yes.
And it can't be dead, because if my phone was dead, it wouldn't
wouldn't
call out
Oh,
or get calls.
yes.
I've taken the whole car apart. I reorganized it. And I've
I'm
called
trying
it.
to help you. I'm very good in.
Look what I did to my book that I couldn't ever find. I got
green duct tape.
green duct tape, and if I find my phone, I'm gonna green duct tape.
Grab it. I
my
can't
phone.
read it, so it's fine.
But I've got plenty. I've got plenty.
Extra cost.
Okay.
Someone may want it, so.
Okay.
See it.
Okay.
I do like that article. I get.
Hey, it's an interesting look into that. Yeah,
I thought it was well done.
I did.
What'd you say? It's not really my style. Hi, how are you? You got a slide on it. You have that hill.
You got an extra thing here.
So you just start at the top and just let it, so you just go slide down with it when you shovel? You make her shovel the
we don't
drive, or
shovel.
you have somebody
I do.
come?
I do as well.
Don't put any ideas in his head. I do everything else.
Okay, everybody, we did the double crossing and the New York Times puzzle. How about that?
It took the New York Times person in the New York Times, it took him 12 minutes to do what we did in 2 hours. It was like giving birth. Like when we finished doing it, oh my God. Well, and he said, he always classified them as easy, medium, and said easy, did it in 12 minutes.
He's a dickhead.
But that's his day job.
Friends, good afternoon. Wonderful to see you all. We have a rather complex set of topics this afternoon. As promised from our last session, when we've been speaking about things in specifics, as promised and delivered, here is a topic that we will speak on, is the role of women in general in Judaism. So I know we've spoken about bits and pieces, marriage aspects, equality aspects, women's health aspects, but this lesson is going to sort of take an expansive general look so that we can look and see from about 10,000 feet up, what are we looking at instead of getting caught in on some of those particulars? Of course, we will cover some of those particulars because they are unavoidable, but overall, that's our idea today, to get a nice survey of this topic. In the next session, I am unashamed to say that for one of the classes that I took at the Spertus Intensive Seminar towards my PhD, one of the final assignments was to create 3 adult education sessions, and today you will get one of them. So, I've never
What
worked.
year was this?
What? This was this year.
Oh,
This was this year.
Did you get your degree yet?
No. When I went to Chicago, Dr. Rachel Haverlock.
I read your newsletter.
Yes, I know you did. I know. You know what's going on. You ever want to know what's going on with the rabbi? Just read the newsletters, right? So the final assignment was to create 3 adult education sessions because Dr. Haverlock, and I'm grateful for her, papers are great, articles are great, but she wanted some sort of practicality for our studies, and I fully agreed, something that I could share directly with the congregation. And so today, in the second class, I will be sharing the first of the 3 that we will be doing together, the things that I studied in Chicago, and I'm now bringing to you, okay, in regards to the succession of leadership, succession of prophecy. So that I'm really looking forward to, because this was a fascinating learning moment for me, and I'm very excited to share it with all of you. So, so the next 2 sessions after this, you will get, not that you don't always get my best, but this one I'm going for great. So, who knows, might be a little bit better. So, but let's open up. Now, I want to give full, expression here in the fact there's a lot of text in this, because there's a lot to cover. Okay, it's a lot of text, and we will cover what we can cover. We might skip around a little bit, but the truth is, like everything that I teach, please know that this is a crash course within an hour. I highly encourage you to take the things and keep running with them. And there's so much. I mean, there's, you can get lost in it all. So, but I always want to try to be exhaustive as possible. So, when we talk about the rule of women, let's open up. And the first thing I wanted to start with was, before we got into any of the denominations and any of the Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, whatever it is, I wanted us to go way back to 2nd century to 5th century rabbinic Judaism. What did the rabbis and the sages at the time write about? What were the things that we took away from their writings in what we call rabbinic Judaism? Rabbinic Judaism, as a reminder, differs from biblical Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism from the Mishnah, the Midrash, the Talmud, all of this sort of stuff led to the creation of every modern Jewish denomination. So it's extremely important. So I've put down a few sort of notes here. So the Mishnah, our 2nd century rabbinic text, declares that when the lives of a man and a woman are simultaneously in danger, we are to save the man first.
That's because the women can save themselves.
It doesn't. Here's the thing about Mishnah: they don't say the wise. Okay, they just say that these are the fortune cookies that we pull out. Okay. Now, as we're going forward in terms of these things, you will see things that are obviously dated, obviously more toward patriarchal. But I will give a little spoiler alert: the fact that the idea that it is fully one way like this, right, is not correct. There is a great deal of value in Judaism for women and a great deal of roles. So it really is more of a complex subject. And so I want you to take some of these and we'll start to combine them together, but we will see sort of a movement in that direction. So it also says a man takes precedence over the woman, as well in respect to our obligation to return a lost object, whatever that means. A woman precedes the man in being provided with clothing.
What do you mean, our obligation to return a lost object?
So there is a great deal of law in terms of, and there's whole sections on this, that if you lose something and someone comes across it, the ideas of ownership, the ideas of who to return it, when to return it, right? And there is some proprietary aspects to womanhood during this time. So, in terms of those complex ideas of who gets what and ownership, the man in that situation would take precedence. There's more to it than that, but I just wanted to gloss over that really quickly. On the other side of it, a woman precedes the man in being provided with clothing, if needed, and being redeemed from captivity. If someone is captured and for ransom, a Jewish community is obligated to pay the ransom. There's always exceptions and things like that. The obligation of the women come first. Okay? Yeah.
This is probably a little off, but I'm concerned about that word redeem. Is
Redeem.
redeem only mean to repay from ransom? Because in Christian tradition, they keep talking about Jesus as the Redeemer.
Oh, no.
Does it come from?
This is more of to redeem the captives, as in get back. Like, there's nothing theological to it. No. This is about getting someone back who's been captured. Redeem is just a fancy word for return.
So when the Christians call Jesus as Redeemer?
They packed a lot more theology into that.
Okay.
Yes, the Redeemer, the Savior, all of that sort of stuff. This is just
Redeemer has nothing to do with ransom.
no. The Talmud, the 5th century commentary on the Mishnah, explains the priorities in terms of which a person's correspondence to the religious ideals of biblical and rabbinic Judaism. The man takes precedence over the woman because he has more mitzvot to perform. Now, we will go into that more in terms of, according to rabbinic law, women are only responsible for certain mitzvot, commandments, according to rabbinic Talmud, the rabbinic Judaism. Okay? And we'll go into what they are, and we'll talk more about that. But the idea, actually, in the next page, we'll talk about the 3 mitzvot that are specifically reserved for women. But overall, what the Talmud is saying is that in Judaism, men are responsible for performing more mitzvot than women. Okay? Thus, what they're saying is a person's correspondence to the religious ideals, right? A man has more in this time era interaction with Jewish texts and Jewish ideals because he is more responsible for, or there are more responsibilities on that man in terms of the commandments. I want to make sure that we understand it's not a weight thing or importance thing. They're saying, look, men have more commandments to follow, thus their interactions with Judaism might be more than a woman. Okay? Than a woman's. Okay? In traditional Judaism, women are for the most part seen as separate but equal. Women's obligations and responsibilities are different from men's, but no less important. In fact, in some ways, women's responsibilities are considered more important. However, what I'll mention is those responsibilities considered more important, we might argue their importance today, okay, such as family and household and those sort of things. But this is from a Talmudic idea, okay? I want to skip down to, according to traditional Judaism, women are endowed with a greater degree of what's called binah, intuition, understanding, and intelligence than men. Okay? The rabbis inferred this from the fact that a woman was built rather than formed. Okay? Remember that Eve was created and built from the rib. Okay? So the idea of binah comes from the same word, okay? To be built in Hebrew, binah, has the same root, and so what they're doing is they're saying, look, if you're built, you have more intuition, understanding, and intelligence. Okay. There is a source that states that the women did not participate in the golden calf episode. There's a midrash that says that it was only the men who threw forward their jewelry and things like that, and the women did not, meaning that they are free of that sin, of that egregious sin, okay? Probably because of their intelligence and understanding of the moment, okay? I thought this was also interesting. The 10 Commandments, we read, honor thy father and thy mother, right? In Leviticus 19, however, it says you revere your mother and your father. Mother comes first. In Exodus, father comes first. In Leviticus, mother comes first. So what people think of that is the fact that it's written one way once and one way the other means that they're on equal playing field. Yeah.
I don't know, I've seen that, a little contradiction.
Yeah.
And maybe you can clear this up.
Sure.
Okay, you said, okay, women were meant to, were built so that would more correspond with more intuitiveness.
Uh-huh.
But if they're built, okay, there's an intention being built. When you build something, it's functional. You
Uh-huh.
know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
would be more mechanical or for a reason. It's not spontaneous, or the empathy or the intuitive means. If God, okay, if God created, let's say Adam, let's say from sand, Mr. said, it's a mixture. It was all randomness, and then there's no, let's say, rhyme or reason, and that would be more intuitive in nature. But if let's say for women, if they were built, then it would be to be function or certain task. That's why a woman was built, and I was just wondering. If you could-
Sure. Yeah. And I think your comment is solid, and it's on solid ground. I think that the response to that might be that that the woman, and this is all conjecture and philosophy, right? But the woman, according to biblical Judaism, being built for a reason is built with intention, a great deal of intention and direction. Okay, and with that comes a great deal of intelligence and understanding, right? There's also a wonderful midrash that talks about how the word in Hebrew for man is ish, and that's Aleph Yud Shin. Okay, they say that Aish is fire, and the Yud stands for the Tetragrammaton of God. So you have like a man being this godly, divine fire, right? They also say that the woman in Hebrew is called Isha. Okay, the hey at the end of a Hebrew word sometimes refers to as direction. Okay, as in Mitzrayim, going towards Mitzrayim, towards Egypt. So the idea is that a man is a godly fire, and a woman is a godly fire who knows where she's going. I like that one. So, but the question is, rattles with philosophy and that sort of thing. But that is what the rabbis are doing here, though, is they're saying the root binah, the same three letters that occur in the word build occur in the word understanding. And so they're saying if that's the Hebrew mystic sort of, just the root of it is in there. That's what they're arguing. Okay.
But isn't it like it's like in philosophy or mythology or whatever, say God of fire or whatever. So if man was fire, then woman, let's say the opposite, would be, let's say water.
Oh, yeah, not in Judaism. Yeah.
More
But in this idea, it's just about direction. Yeah. Moving on to the next page, there are 3 mitzvot, 3 commandments that are reserved specifically for women. Okay. Nirot, the lighting of the candles for Shabbat. Challah, the creation of challah, of dough. And of course, Nidah, this is going to the mikveh, separating yourself during the menstrual periods and ritual immersions afterwards. Okay. Yes.
I read that challah originally was just a part of the bread that was for priests.
Oh, yeah. Well, it is.
Became
Right. All of those rituals, in terms of the food, right, represent like the portion. And that's why that's why part of that is in there, the priestly portion. The reason why we put salt on our challah is because they used to put salt on the sacrifices. So it's an expressionism of that priestly part. Everything comes down from that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and we'll talk about how, I think it's fine to talk about the idea, and we do this at Learner's Minion about lighting candles, why lighting candles was reserved for women, because women at that time did not go to synagogue, which means they were at home when Shabbat began, and so it was their obligation to light the candles, right? Challah for the same reason. The men were in were in synagogue, women were not there. So again, when people say, oh, there's these wonderful commandments that are only reserved for women, yes, that's true, but there's some sort of archaic reasons as to why, right? The sexual separation during a women's menstrual period, that makes sense. Okay, a man doesn't have to worry about that. But overall, 2 of these mitzvot can be performed by a man if no woman is present. In other words, if there's no women in the synagogue, a man can light candles and a man can make challah. No big deal. The other part is sort of biological. These are related to the home and family. Okay, so again, we have to put ourselves in the minds of the 2nd century to 5th century, that the idea that the woman was not allowed to go and worship equally. Her job, her role was familial, matriarchal in the home, that sort of stuff, and that's where all of this branches out of. Okay, so it's important to keep that in mind. Okay, that from today's standard, we think about it quite differently. From the 2nd century and onward, in that sort of timeline, this was considered, the status quo and an honor and a wonderful thing. So all of these things come from a perspective of time. Okay. The thing about you can read about the thing about the golden calf. And they also say that they also teach that Rosh Chodesh, the monthly festival, was taken away from the men and given to the women because they didn't, all these are rabbinic sort of thoughts and equalizers in their way. Okay. So, for instance, in traditional Judaism, a woman's voluntary attendance at daily worship services do not count towards a minyan. Okay, in traditional Judaism, we've fixed that, of course, in Reform Judaism. A woman's voluntary recitation of certain prayers does not count because in traditional Judaism, women don't lead services. Again, we fixed that. Women's voluntary reading for the Torah does not count because they weren't allowed to read Torah. We fixed that. In traditional Judaism, a woman is thought as a boy under 13 in the same way, right? They're not obligated to perform these mitzvot. Now, keep in mind the terminology here, okay? They're not obligated to, okay? They can, but, they're not obligated to, but that can very easily be translated into they don't do it, right? So if you're in a conversation about this, the idea of they're not obligated to versus they're not allowed to is the big argument, because one sort of flows into the other a little too quickly, and that is how these traditions in terms of patriarchal society and restrictions sort of go and say, well, women aren't obligated to. Well, that's nice, but they still should, right, is what Reform Judaism says, okay? And we'll get to that. So let's move to Reform Judaism. Not a great deal in Reform Responsa about this because from the beginning, a great deal of it was already views of equality and things like that. I took a couple bits out of other Responsa. This particular one on the minyan was actually talked about whether we need a minyan at all to worship. And it says, it cannot be denied that the rule of 10 is frequently disregarded in Reformed congregations, especially in small communities, but not there alone. With lessening worship attendance in general, even in places where adequate numbers of worships can be found, attention to the time-honored practice of requiring a quorum is rarely an issue. Yes, there are good reasons why this practice deserves our continued attention and respect, but the proviso, of course, that any Reform minyan would count women as equal partners. In other words, we've at least made it a little easier in small congregations around the world, in Reform congregations, to find that 10, to get to that quorum. So this was just a part that was pulled out of, what do we do? There's not a lot of time, it's what do we do? Do we pray if there's a minyan or not? How important is the minyan? In Reform Judaism, we have women there as well to help us reach that minyan, okay? There was a CCR response on discarded practices that states, I pulled this out, being a product of historical processes, certain of its laws have lost their binding force with the passing of conditions that called them forth, but as a repository of permanent spiritual ideals, the Torah remains the dynamic source of the life of Israel. Thus, we can readily accept new customs and celebrations, such as Yom HaAtzmaut, Berit Chaim, or such ideas as the complete equality of men and women, which has led to women rabbis and cantors. In other words, the rabbis here are arguing that Reform Judaism doesn't just disregard practices, it takes them back and goes back and forth with that sort of thing. So new customs, the idea of new customs and celebrations is that line to walk between, we're not going to completely transform Judaism by accident. However, what the response is saying is, yes, but the adoption of new customs and things like that allows us to have equality with women and women rabbis and all these wonderful benefits that if we only kept to the old style, we would never have gotten to. That's what their argument is about here. In 1922, there was a discussion at HUC about the ordination of women. They ruled that a woman cannot justly be denied the privilege of ordination, but the first woman at HUC was not ordained, I think, until 1971. So there was a great deal of dormancy of the ruling and actually in practice, as there is in many fields. But what the rabbi said was, whatever may have been the specific legal status of the Jewish woman regarding certain religious functions, her general position in Jewish religious life has ever been an exalted one. She has been the priestess in the home, and our sages have always recognized her as the preserver of Israel. In view of these Jewish teachings and in keeping with the spirit of our age, 1922, and traditions of our conference, we declare that a woman cannot justly be denied the privilege of ordination. And that still is our thought. Women, yes, 1922. Yeah. Now, again, the fact that they ruled that did not mean that there wasn't societal pressure, that, people got halfway, and then there was all kinds of problems in reality, right? Which is why I think Sally Priesand was the first woman ordained by HUC and was in the early 1970s.
That's 50 years later.
50 years later. Yeah. So again, how we rule is great, right? And I think that works across the board, right? We can say, like when LGBTQ was all across the board or whatever it is, it took some time to get those congregations to actually put it into practice. This was a big one for, this was a huge turning point. But we got there. Late, in my opinion, but we got there. Yeah.
Because American women only got the vote in 1920.
Right.
So
And that's what they mean, the spirit of the age. So again, I think that's well noted in the fact that we cannot deny that outside influences of what is going on in the world have a profound effect on our religious views as well. Okay, if you keep an eye out right now on the Mormon Church, there's a lot of things going on that are changing in the Mormon Church. And before the 1960s, they said they don't recognize African Americans or whatever. They had the Mark of Cain. All of a sudden, the civil rights thing happened, and boom, look at that. So we can't deny that women's suffrage in 1920 had a profound effect on women leadership and leadership in general in the reform movement, right? So absolutely. Women in Reform Judaism has there's a great deal of history on this. Reform thinkers in Germany, this is late or mid 19th century, made the case for women's equality in Judaism. They were the first reformers were very radical in sort of abolishing old archaic customs and rules, which they said stifled the public expression of women's religiosity. And as much as Germany did that, in the United States, it really took hold. Practical innovations took hold in that way. So 1972 was Sally Priesand's ordination. Reform congregations have also provided important sites for Jewish women to work out the tensions between evolving societal expectations for women and the roles identified within traditional Jewish practice. I think we have done a good job of that. Things like Women for Reform Judaism, sisterhood, all these sort of things as to trying to find that role, right? To create equality while still understanding that men and women have different skills, have different things, just like, one of the things we talk about now sort of freely, which was talked about even more delicately in the 1970s, was a woman rabbi is different than a male rabbi in terms of how they present, what they teach, who comes to them, right? People now, when they're asking for jobs, they say, we actually want a woman rabbi. We need, we've got 2 men, we need a woman, right? Or we've got 3 women, we want another woman. We have that sort of aura, or vice versa, right? We can't deny that there are certain skills and certain just cultural things that happen with that sort of thing. At the same time, the reform movement is trying to balance and saying, look, that's all fine and good, but we want it all on an equal playing field, right? You can decide what you want to do, but we're dealing with what we call the roles identified, the identified roles of men and women that reach back the centuries, if that makes sense.
I got a question about that, with the equality. So if the reform wants to say men and women are equal across the plane, then why is there, let's say, a differentiation, let's say, between the sexes, or sex or gender? Why can't it just be merit? Okay, if a woman is good as, let's say, to be a rabbi as a man, or if they're both competing, wouldn't the base on merit weigh out rather than?
We'd hope so.
You know what I'm saying?
Right?
So
we'd hope so.
So there really isn't, true equity if one's defined at a lower status, or even.
I agree. And again, this is the tension in terms of what we write versus what we put out into the world, right? We would love it if it was just merit and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, whoever sits on that search committee decides what they want, and we can't really control. We can push and we can, but
there's also, you can be equal and different, because women are different, and a woman rabbi will bring different things than a male rabbi, and that's because we're different. We're equal, but we're different.
And that's okay to say that, right? To be able to say, we've had 50 male rabbis, we need a woman. Like, let's try, merit is, you'd want them to say, look, if we have a man and a woman rabbi who are of equal merit, it all depends on the sort of idiosyncrasies and saying, like, well, what do we want? Do we want a more feminine sort of approach, or and who knows? I mean, there's so many variables. But you're right. The ideal is merit, right? Is you're all equal, great, wonderful. It's all about personal preference, that sort of thing. And again, it's about, we can write whatever we want. It's about the realities of who's sitting in the chairs, who's on the search committee, who's on the board, and how old are they, and what era did they grow up in, and what was their relationship with their mother, whatever it is. So, right, no, we won't get into that. But in American synagogues, early innovations, even before the formal reform movement came, American synagogues had done away with the mechitza, right, the barriers that kept women out of sight. Congregations had mixed choirs in American synagogues, and confirmation services started to happen, the confirmation stuff, and so men and women were both confirmed. It wasn't until 1922 that, again, big year, 1922, that the first bat mitzvah occurred. And it was actually by Reconstructionist Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, but before all of that took hold, the confirmation service was the great equalizer in that way. Okay, really fascinating as well that I wanted to mention was the idea of family pews. Okay, the innovation of women's status sort of happened by accident in Reform Judaism. The topic, or the challenge was how to create a family environment, right? To make sure that children could be where they want to be. And so the idea of the family pew accidentally, incidentally put men and women sitting together, right? They'd already done away with the mechitza, right, the barrier, but it's certainly possible that in early American Judaism and German Judaism, men and women still sat separately. But the idea of the family focus of Isaac Mayer Wise brought them to sitting together in the same pew. So it sort of happened by convenience. The idea is, you know what, it's more convenient if men and women sit together because the families can take care of each other. So always keep in mind in terms of understanding the why as to what happened, right? Everyone thinks that all the things that we do drop out of the sky from some divine voice, but sometimes they happen by accident and we just sort of roll with it.
Did the same thing kind of happen in Orthodox Judaism? So I assume in the early days, women didn't go to temple.
Correct, they didn't. And when they did, when they were allowed to, they had to sit
Oh,
out of sight.
then they.
And then the mechitza with the
So
barrier.
there has been a change. In modern Orthodox Judaism, is there still a mechitza?
Yes, there is. In the what we call modern Orthodoxy, it's more of a curtain. It's
Yeah.
there as a more of a, an expression of traditionalism rather than the ideas that we talked about when we taught about the mechitza, about the, not being able to focus and how, women's hair does this hypnotizing effect and we can't focus on God and all the dangerous stuff that you women, do to us, restricting us from prayer. But no, they still have that there. And so when you go into modern Orthodox,
But not the shul.
the shul ruled against the mechitza.
Yeah.
It was brought to the table, but they ruled against it. Yeah. But you see sort of kids running back and forth, between mom and dad, but in the ultra Orthodox, no, they're out of sight completely. It's a wall, you're not allowed to see anything, that sort of thing. Men are with men, women are with women.
I think that, they say convenience, an act of convenience, but I mean, it certainly had the monetary impact of building something or not. You almost wonder if that wasn't a part of it.
Hey, you never know. You never
wanna
know.
give credit for something else, but sometimes I think a lot of decisions do get, for the wrong reason for the right result.
And I think that in general is a great deal of how not just reform stuff happened, but conservative, Orthodox. I mean, a lot of things is like the wrong reason, the right result, right? Absolutely. I think that's fine. I want to talk about the idea of the confirmation, bat mitzvah, and the rabbinate. These are three big things, okay, to talk about the role of women and their growth and things like that. The confirmation service, and this is basically you are confirmed as a Jewish learner. The truth is the confirmation service is one of those wonderful things that we saw our Christian friends in church doing and said, that looks nice. Like Sunday school, that looks nice. And consecration, that looks nice. Let's bring it over and make it ours and redefine it, okay? So one of the things, if the idea that we want to talk about is that before bat mitzvah took hold, right, there was no formal equal celebration in terms of Jewish learning. There was no step in the ladder, the life cycle event. The confirmation solved that problem. If there were Reform congregations who were not ready to perform, or rabbis not ready to perform a bat mitzvah, they could do confirmation. And in fact, after World War I, because all the boys were getting bar mitzvahs, they didn't need confirmations. Confirmations were for women alone. In other words, it became their version of a bat mitzvah until the bat mitzvah was finally put into place. Okay.
Does everyone now, as a child in a reform, have a confirmation and a bat or bar?
They do. So today we have steps in the ladder from consecration, the beginning of your Jewish learning. We have bar and bat mitzvah, and then we have confirmation. Confirmation occurs typically 10th grade or 12th grade, depending. Then we let you go. You're not, but just like bar and bat mitzvah, it's not a graduation. It's just another step into where you're going. So the idea of like, we don't see them again until, they get married.
That's what happens
Yeah.
to the Catholics. I don't see them
It's
again
exactly
until they
right.
get married.
It's exactly right.
Well,
So, yes.
in the Reformed temple where I grew up, it was like a contract the parents had to sign.
Yeah.
So if you were going to be, let's say, involved in the religious school, that they have to guarantee,
Yeah.
that you go through confirmation.
Wow.
Bold move. And not
And
rare.
This is one of the biggest. This is like the
Yeah.
biggest temple. in
Not
the
rare.
city.
The idea
So
is
it ensured their
correct. The ideas of consecration, bar mitzvah, confirmation are all to say, like, keep them in the school, keep them learning, right? Which is why if this was a larger congregation and I didn't have 3 confirmation kids, I would do what other confirmation congregations do, and that is they move it to 12th grade, meaning you graduate high school, you graduate religious school, right? Otherwise, if you do it in 10th grade, you've got 2 years of nothing. I was one of those nerdy kids who asked the rabbi to keep teaching post-confirmation class afterwards. But, not everyone's like that. Some people are like, hooray, we're done. But you're right. But yes, the idea is to add another step in that. So pertinent to our discussion is that when women were not allowed to become bat mitzvah, the confirmation stood proudly in its place to say, this is a part to celebrate the learning and role of women until the bat mitzvah occurred. Okay.
Okay, but the Orthodox have taken up bat mitzvah.
Some yes, some no.
But before they had it, but when they do it different, the
Yes.
women just read the Haftorah.
The Haftorah. They're not allowed to read the Torah. Yeah. So they're not quite there yet.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it is a bat mitzvah per se in their interpretation.
Okay.
A reform bar and bat mitzvah is exactly the same from start to finish. The expectations are exactly the same. That is not so in Orthodoxy or even in conservative Judaism in certain parts. So 1922 was Judith Kaplan, the first bat mitzvah ever by Mordecai Kaplan, and that took roots in the 1930s and 40s. Again, it takes time, right? It takes time for the breakthrough to common practice. It could take up to 20 years, and now there is scarcely anywhere that bat mitzvahs are all over the place, and quite right, as they should be. Yes, Sally Priesand, 1971, seen as the ultimate realization of women's equality by the Reform movement. Finally, all three branches of the Reform movement said, okay, the Union for Reform Judaism, or the UAHC at the time, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, and Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion said, okay, we are ordaining a woman. She is a rabbi. She's not called something else, right? In Orthodoxy, they're called something else. They're not called rabbis. She is going to be ordained. The same laying on the hands, the smicha that is done with a man is to be done with a woman. Okay? Yes.
Excuse me about the three branches. I didn't know there were three branches. What does that mean?
Three branches.
There were three branches of Reform Judaism.
I didn't say that. What did I say? One of the major three branches of Judaism: Reform, Conservative, Orthodox.
No.
No, you say the different organizations.
The organizations of Reform
organization.
Judaism. The Union for Reform Judaism are the body which governs the congregations, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which governs rabbis, and the Hebrew Union College, which makes students. Those are the three branches of our movement.
Okay.
Of our movement. Sorry about that. Yes. By 2005, at least 15 had been appointed to senior rabbinic positions. So this is an ongoing conversation that is happening right now in the Reform movement. There is a women's group that is specifically built to help make this a little bit better, because despite the rulings that men and women are both rabbis and everything is equal, for the most part, we saw some upsetting survey data that women rabbis are, for the most part, paid less than men rabbis, even in the Reform movement, which is extremely upsetting. The other is, we're talking about senior rabbinic positions in large Reform congregations, for the most part, are still given to men. Okay, not all across the board. There are incredible women rabbis who have led 3,000 members and 1,000 members and all that sort of stuff. But again, the idea of the ideal versus the practice, we are still struggling with. There are still, again, who sits on that board, who sits on that search committee, right? The CCAR can say, you have to, whatever they want. It's up to the congregation. So there is now a task force in place to make sure that the pay gets equalized, and to make sure that, as much as we can, to get women in the roles, in the same roles as men. And I can tell you, I was devastated when I learned the survey data that, you know, I was devastated to hear that in the reform movement, which preaches so much equality and so, I mean, that the difference in pay, how could it could possibly, you know, but this is the kind of stuff that goes underneath the surface. And so there is a task force working on it, and by God, we hope that they fix it. One of the responses by Steve Fox, the outgoing chief executive, by the way, his successor, Hara, is the first woman chief executive of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. This is the first time that happened, 2018. Pretty late, but we're getting there. But anyway, his response to it was certainly sensitive. They created the task force, but they also mentioned that the reason why the difference in pay might be there is because men occupy these senior positions which pay more and that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of conversation about this, but we need to get a hold of it first. Yeah.
Okay, is it just pay, like, are you just looking at salaries, or is it total compensation?
Oh,
Because-
both.
Because sometimes salary amount, but they can be compensated in different things.
It's both.
And in some professions or whatever, so when they say pay, you just look at, let's say, salary, but not everything else.
Right. No, it's both. I mean, it's salary, it's benefits, it's all that kind of stuff. But again, we need to figure out, is that, you know, congregations being jerks, or is that, you know, a product of the system of not promotion? You know, is it the glass ceiling, or, you know, that? So that we are working on it because we take such pride in it in terms of the reform movement. Yeah.
When did stuff change from Friday night to Saturday? I think it was before you.
What's that
Like
stuff?
bat mitzvahs.
So the Friday night service and Saturday morning service, for a long time in 20th century classical Reform Judaism, they did away with the Saturday morning service,
Right.
which meant two things. One, the Torah service had to be moved to the Friday night, right? And two, bar and bat mitzvahs and like that had to be moved to the Friday night as a matter of, it's either that or we don't do it, right?
It worked
So-
for years.
It worked for years. So the idea